Okay, so we're back, and we always love to dig into something fresh and new and coming up soon. And
Yeah.
and so you sent us an article. We're always taking suggestions from you guys listening out there. So
Yeah.
this one's from Electronic Groove. It's dated March 24th, 2025.
Very recent.
Very recent, exactly. And it's all about Shanti Celeste's second studio album.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so Romance is the title.
Okay.
Um, and so we thought, for all of you out there who really like to, follow artists' journeys
Right.
and are always interested in new music and kind of see how that journey unfolds.
Absolutely. And you know what I think is going to be really interesting about this one is that it sounds like she's really tapping into relationships,
Oh, really?
both romantic and platonic.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which I think, could be really interesting for her sound because I feel like often, we hear in electronic music a lot of the focus is on like, dance floor energy or like
Yeah.
inner reflection, but like that kind of platonic, like friend connection. I'm curious to hear how that kind of comes out sonically.
Yeah, well, and for those of you who are like, okay, I need this in my life now,
Right.
when can I get it?
Yeah, so it's coming out May 16th
Okay.
and it's being released on Peach Discs
Okay.
and Method 808. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, so two really great, labels that are known for sort of like forward-thinking electronic music. So that's a good sign, I think.
Awesome. All right, so now I got to ask you about this first single, Thinking About You.
Yeah, so this one's really interesting.
It sounds like there's a story.
There's a big story behind it. So it's actually a tribute to a friend of hers who was also her first boyfriend who passed away.
Oh, wow.
And she was quoted in the article as saying, he was my first boyfriend, but also a really good friend. He was a really important person in my life.
Oh, wow.
So, I think that kind of like personal connection,
Oh, yeah.
really informs the music in a way that like a lot of people can connect with on a very fundamental level.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, this is her follow-up to Tangerine
Mhm.
from 2019.
Yeah.
So for those of us who, maybe are familiar with her work already, how do you think this album might differ? Or what are you maybe expecting?
Well, I think that the first album is always kind of like setting the stage, and then the second one, you kind of go deeper,
Right.
into your themes and into the sounds that you're working with. So if you think about Tangerine, it was
Yeah.
very much like, bright and like very kind of like upbeat and energetic.
Right. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So I think with this one, we might see something that's a little bit more introspective, a little bit more mature in terms of like the emotional, kind of range that she's working with.
Yeah, so some other interesting things that the article mentioned
Yeah.
were some of the collaborators
Oh, yeah.
that she worked with.
Yeah, there's some really interesting names on there.
So tell me who she's working with.
So she's got Batu Hal Sutherland and Shivam Sharma.
Wow, that's a really interesting mix.
Yeah, and they all bring such different things to the table. So like you've got Batu, who is like, very experimental, very like bass heavy.
Yeah.
Hal Sutherland is more on that like kind of like melodic ambient tip.
Yeah.
And then Shivam Sharma is bringing in, a whole other like background and influence. So I think that could really point to like a really rich and varied sonic landscape on this album.
And even just glancing at the track list,
Yeah.
you can kind of already start to get a feel for the vibe of the album just based on some of the titles like Butterflies Watching and Medicine.
Totally. And I mean, they just even evoke like such a sense of like, closeness and introspection and intimacy.
Absolutely.
Which really like, aligns with what they were saying about the album's kind of exploration of relationships. So yeah, I'm really curious to hear how those kind of translate sonically.
Yeah, me too. And it sounds like it's not just going to be a studio release that we can listen to.
Right.
There's actually a launch event.
There is.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so she's having this event called Club Celeste at the Cause in London on May 17th, so the day after the album comes out.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it's going to be a whole, lineup of really great DJs like Daisy Moon, Gabrielle Cortang, Lishi.
Yeah.
So I think it just speaks to like, that whole community around her music and like, bringing it to life in a live setting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening who are intrigued and want to check it out, how can you start listening to this now?
Yeah, so the single Thinking About You is out now.
Okay.
So you can get a little first taste of, what the album is going to sound like and kind of like that, emotional depth that she's bringing.
Okay.
And the album itself is available for pre-order.
Awesome.
So you can make sure that you're going to get it on May 16th when it drops.
Perfect. So I think just to sum up, what we've learned from this article.
Yeah.
From Electronic Groove.
Yeah.
Romance, the upcoming album from Shanti Celeste.
No, I know.
Cracks, exploring human connection.
All the different facets.
Sounds like it's going to be deeply personal, probably sonically, a little bit different than her debut, and
Yeah.
definitely something to keep our eye on.
Yeah, and I think that first single is like a really good, kind of like entry point into like what could be a really, really emotionally resonant album.
Yeah, for sure. So, as we kind of wrap things up here, I want to leave you all with a question.
Okay.
We heard about this really personal story behind thinking about you and how this whole album is about, romance in all its
Yeah.
forms. So I'm curious to know, how do you think that exploration of intimacy and connection is going to kind of manifest across the whole album
Right.
sonically?
Yeah.
What kind of, new places do you think she might be taking us to?
Mm,
Something to ponder until May.
for sure.
All right, and we will see you next time on The Deep Dive.
Bye.